Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Jake Williams Show. I am your host, Jake Williams. A very special episode this time around. This was actually later than expected. This was supposed to come up yesterday, but it's coming up on Tuesday, April 30th. I had a full episode recorded, and the file got corrupted, and I could not recover it. So we're doing it all over again. This, of course, is the Avengers Endgame Spoilercast special for the Jake Williams Show. So if you have not seen Avengers Endgame, you should not be watching this. You should not be listening to this. You press pause, go see the movie, even though I think it's hard not to see this movie. This movie made $1.2 billion in 4 days. So if you're one of the few people that has not seen this movie, do not watch this, do not listen. Go see it, come back, be a part of the conversation. You're going to want to, because this movie is phenomenal. It is, to me, and sure there are issues with the plot. There could be issues with any movie, that whole thing. I know in terms of perfection, there is no such thing as a perfect movie. But for me, this is a perfect movie. This is a perfect close of a chapter and an end of an era of 11 years of storytelling in over 22 movies. It's just outright insane. So go experience that, come back, and be a part of the fun. So I saw this movie at 11 a.m. on Friday. I wanted to see it on Thursday, but the pre-sale stuff started around 7 a.m. I'm not a morning person, and as much as I wanted to have that opening day experience, that Thursday night experience, and talk about it, and get a part of it and be there first, a lot of other people did too, so that just did not happen for me, which is totally fine. It's not a big deal. I saw it the next day, 11 a.m. I could have seen it at 11 p.m. on Thursday, but it was a group of people. We were with our significant others, and I love Ashley, but she is not a night owl like me. She is very much a morning person. I'm very much a night owl. So I knew that she could not make it through this movie. And I don't think anybody would want that have that thing where you go to the movie theater, you've been waiting for this movie forever, and then fall asleep. So it would not be fair to her. It would not be fair. Just like if you're still listening to this and thinking I'm not going to spoil the movie, it just wouldn't be fair to your movie-going experience. Stop listening, because I'm about to spoil it. So the movie opens with Hawkeye, which is surprising. He has kind of a cold open before we get any of the Marvel Studios logos or anything like that. It's him with his family. He's teaching his daughter how to be the next Hawkeye, essentially. And he goes to pick up an arrow, and they were snapped. And that is literally how we start the movie. And I remember I looked over at Adam, who was sitting next to me, and I just go, "Whoo boy!" and take a sip of my soda, because that's just a good idea of how emotionally invested and crazy this next 3 hours I'm going to go on is going to be. Then we see the stuff with Tony, where he's on the ship with Nebula, and they kind of get the stuff from the trailer, giving the message to Pepper. He's come to terms that he's going to die in the void of space. He loves her. He's going to think of her when he finally dies. And when you think it's too bleak, Captain Marvel shows up, brings him back to the Avengers headquarters, which I am a little bit surprised that they didn't spend a ton of time with Captain Marvel and have that scene from the end of her movie, but that's also what I love about this movie. They're done really trying to handhold throughout this final movie, because at the end of the day, people have had 11 years to 10 years to catch up to this. Now we're in the 11th year, but they had 10 years to catch up to this. They had 21 other movies to catch up to this. I don't have a problem with them not holding hands and not taking time to get the people that might not know what's going on. You just can't. And some people probably have this same issue with this movie like they did Endgame, where it's a movie that can't stand on its own. I don't think I'm not saying that's not true, but that just doesn't mean that it's not a good movie. You could say on its own it's probably not as good as people think it is, but that's not the same argument as saying an Iron Man versus Avengers Endgame. because those last two Avengers movies are totally the sum of all its parts, and it can't be judged differently that way. So knock that one out of your don't even try bringing that here. They found a heat signature. They found Farmer Thanos right away. And Captain Marvel kind of has a really cool moment, which he's like, let's go kill him. Let's stop messing around. He's still got the stones. Let's go kill him, take the stones, snap everybody back. And they do. I think was the most shocking moment of this movie. They find Farmer Thanos. They say, where's the stones? We know you used them a few days ago. And he says, no, I don't. I just used the stones to destroy the stones. I am inevitable. This was your destiny. This is what happens. And then he's talking to Nebula, and then whack. Thor had enough of it, cuts off Thanos' head. And what I thought would have been applause and cheers in the movie theater, it was dead silence. It was a satisfying moment, but it still had the weight of those people are still, the people that got snapped aren't coming back. And that moment doesn't feel as satisfying as it should. It's very hollow. And I love that because that is such a big swerve of what we expected. The fact that they just off the big bad dude that caused all this problems, they spent this whole entire 2.5 hour movie building him up as this big bad that they just cut his head off in the next movie, maybe 15, 20 minutes in. That's insane. You don't see that kind of storytelling, especially in a superhero movie where, you know, you still have the same villain carryover. You don't usually think to do that. So that was pretty amazing. And another surprise to me was the fact that they did the 5 years time jump after they cut off Thanos' head. So we have to live 5 years after that after the people getting snapped or dusted or whatever you want to call it. And so we have a moment that I could understand criticisms of, but it doesn't take away from me. I still feel this movie's perfect. There is a little bit of a Deus Ex mouse, where a mouse, just a rat, I guess, casually just hits a button and brings out Ant-Man from the van with the quantum realm in it from Ant-Man and the Wasp. He shows up. He's looking around like, what the hell happened? Because you got to keep in mind, he doesn't know anything about Thanos or the Snap or the Infinity Stones or any of that stuff. So he's, you know, kind of carting around. And eventually he runs into Nat and Black Widow and Cap, where I thought it was really cool too, where Cap is like having a therapy session with other survivors of, I think it's more of like a VA thing, but it is interesting and cool to see Cap in that role, helping out other veterans and helping out other people. I could be wrong on what that is. I think that's what it's supposed to be. If I'm remembering it correctly, that's what it is. And I really thought that was cool. But you're also seeing Black Widow go through a change. And I think that's probably my favorite thing about these movies, and I'll get to a couple other characters that I really like have these changes. But the idea that these characters are still dealing with it, but they're growing and they're changing and they're having different roles. Black Widow kind of made her own version of the Avengers, of what she had left. You had Rocket doing stuff for her. You had War Machine. You had Captain Marvel. You had Nebula. Like, they were all kind of still making their own little version of the Avengers, still kind of doing everything. And it was something new, something different. I really like that. But Ant-Man comes knocking on the Avengers' door and says, "Look, we met before. It was at the airport. Remember that stuff? Well, I have an idea. I was in the quantum realm for 5 years. Man, that should have been so long for you. Well, it didn't really feel that long because time works differently in the quantum realm. Are you familiar with quantum physics?" And this is where the movie really takes its shape, and this is where I really did not expect what I was getting into. If the Thanos stuff wasn't enough, now we're going way far into something that I just did not expect, and it took me on a ride and a journey that I was surprised I was so into. Because as you heard on the predictions episode, I had thought there was going to be some sort of thing with time, some sort of thing with maybe parallel universes or things like that. So when they incorporate time travel, or as Ant-Man likes to call it, a time heist, when they incorporate it in a movie, that doesn't surprise me. But I was shocked that I would say probably an hour hour and a half, maybe 2 of this 3-hour movie is dedicated to time travel. This is a full-blown time travel movie, and I love time travel movies, so this is kind of perfect. But yeah, Ant-Man's like, man, we could go into the quantum realm, we could go back in time, and we could stop things, and blah, blah, blah. But they need a big brain. And who do they go to? Obviously, they go to Tony Stark. Guess what? It's been 5 years since the snap. He living in a log cabin. He has a kid. So he's finally getting at the things he wanted. Like, it sucks for these people that all this stuff happened, but despite all that, he managed to not die in space and get to spend time with the love of his life and start a family that they've always wanted. So why would he risk all of that to go through all this stuff and time travel? And it sucks to lose those people, and people lost a lot. But why would he put himself through that and his family through that? So that arc I thought was interesting. So they don't get Tony. Then they go and meet one of the most interesting changes to a character. It's one of the two that I thought were really big changes, and I dig. One is Hulk. When they meet him, he is, I call him Professor Hulk, but Doc Green is actually in the comics. But at this point, Bruce Banner just says, I'm not going to fight it anymore. The Hulk and I are going to be one person. We are together. It is a relationship where we've bonded. And I'm still going to be Bruce, but I'm also going to be this giant green monster. And I can understand how people would be deterred by that and not enjoy that. It works for me again because this is a silly movie. Like, this movie is kind of out there. And somehow, this is the beauty of storytelling of Marvel and all of these movies. It doesn't entirely feel out of place, and it still manages to work. And although the explanation of it is a little kind of a throwaway, dialogue, I don't deter it because this is a 3-hour movie and they have a lot of storylines that they have to wrap up very quickly. It's the same thing when people complain about Game of Thrones, how fast they're moving, how they're moving to places so quickly compared to the first couple seasons. We've got to wrap up some stories, guys. We got to keep the train rolling. So they get Hulk into it. He's helping with time travel, and then they have a funny scene with Scott Lang where he gets older, he gets younger, he turns into a baby. Like, they don't quite have the time travel down. And then there's a great moment where Tony is by himself. It's late at night, and he just says, for shits and gigs, let's see if I can actually figure out time travel. And he did it. And his reaction is priceless. And it's like, I'm not a parent, but I've seen these parental moments happen where he's like, holy shit. And then his kid hears him and says shit back. I've been on the other side of that, not being a parent, seeing it, and it's just as funny in this movie as it is in real life. And again, it just adds to the stakes. It adds to the weight of this story where Tony has a kid that he loves very much and would do anything for. And so she, I think, is kind of the MacGuffin of a way to like move this story forward for him. And like, I get this, but what about Clint? What about other people that maybe have lost a family? And I'm lucky, but other people aren't. So this was finally the moment where he wakes up and says, I know how to do this. We could do it. It's a one-time thing. And it happens. So after they get Iron Man on board, they got to get the rest of the Avengers together. And this is, again, where the movie takes a turn that I wasn't expecting and didn't quite know I would like, but it manages to work again. They meet Thor, and Thor moved to Norway and created New Asgard. So all those Asgardian refugees, whatever's left of them, they found a home again. And I just thought that was really cool. And the idea that they're modern day Vikings, and that, they're like Deadliest Catch, like crab fishermen and things like that. And Valkyrie's back. She didn't get dusted. She is, helping to run this place. And this is where the movie, I thought, could have gone a certain direction, but they go another one. And they do that all throughout this whole 3-hour experience. But there was what I thought when she said he only comes in when the shipment comes in, and it's just beer. So I'm like, okay, so Thor he's an alcoholic. This is how he's dealing with the repercussions of the Thanos thing, where he's not super happy with himself. He's not happy with it. So I thought he was going to be like a depressed drunk. But Chris Hemsworth crushes it here, where he's fat. He's got a beer gut, and he's funny, and it works. Korg's there playing Fortnite, and it stuck with the theme of Ragnarok's version of Thor, and I think that's smart for Marvel because they can't keep doing the traditional comic book Shakespearean Thor. It just doesn't. He's not that interesting. They tried that with 2 movies. That character's not interesting. Ragnarok and Infinity War, this movie, he's actually a fleshed out, cool, fun character. And although he's dealing with PTSD, they're doing it in a way that's different from Iron Man 3, where Tony was having panic attacks. It was handled very seriously. And this, it's handled seriously in times, but it's mostly just let's make fun of drunk Thor. And it manages to be successful in that. And don't worry, by the time the third act rolls around, you get, the traditional Asgardian style Thor, but we get to hang out with this weird, lazy drunk, and it somehow works. So now we're full-blown time travel. And it's kind of this is what adds to what makes this feel like this is the end. It adds to the finality of the story. Because now we have time travel, and they're going back to get the stones. And the way that they're split up is you have to go where you were, like these characters were. And then they sit down and, they're planning and they're doing this stuff. And this is where the movie has the most fun, where it is figuring out time travel, where it is figuring out where all the stones were. And it's taking these characters on journeys in new ways that we didn't expect. And then they have that epiphany, oh crap, there's 3 stones in New York. So then they have these, they finally get their plan set up, and one of them is going back to New York in 2012. They go back to the first Avengers movie, and that is so freaking cool. Like, I remember when we saw that in the theater, and I just go, this is awesome, yes. Because it adds to the thought of, this is the end of an era. This is the end of the Infinity Saga. Let's go back and look what made it great. And they can play around in that era. And then they also go back to Thor the Dark World, because you have the Reality Stone there. We go back to the beginning of Guardians of the Galaxy, where, when Star-Lord finds the Power Stone. We go back there, and then we deal with the Soul Stone. We'll talk about that in a minute. But in doing that, it actually made those other MCU movies better. It made the Dark World better. It made the Avengers better, because by going back in time, it sort of fills in its own plot holes, where you're wondering, how did Loki get the stupid thing on his face? What, you get to see moments that you normally wouldn't, where you see what we know of the Winter Soldier, those people, the Hydra agents in Winter Soldier, they're in this movie, and that's how they get the scepter, and things like that. Little bits that get filled in here are really effective. And when we talk about with Thor and Rocket, when they go to the Dark World, I don't know if it makes the movie better, but it does help reestablish Thor's relationship with his mother. And it gives us a moment to get the old Thor back, or get just Thor back, because he is still dealing, like I said, he still has the PTSD with what happened with Thanos. He realizes that even though he killed this guy, he told him he'd kill him, he did kill him, but it doesn't change anything. He still lost everything. He lost his brother, he's lost his mom, he's lost his dad, his sister that I didn't even know, he loses all these things. And it finally just took the fun out. So for him to have that moment with his mom and tell her, you need to get back to who you are, and not what you think you want to be, but who you are, and like you got to find yourself. That moment, I think, really makes her death in Thor: The Dark World more impactful. And especially the part where he finally calls Mjolnir and he finds out that he's still worthy. That was a really cool. I thought that was a really cool moment. In terms of the Avengers stuff, everything was great, and then the fact that you throw in Ant-Man in the mix, that wasn't there before, he gets thrown in, that is great. And the fact that we talk about Captain America, they make fun of his Avengers 1 costume. It says it doesn't look great on your ass, and Ant-Man's like, you've got America's ass. Like, things like that are great. I think my favorite scene of that whole Avengers New York sequence was when Cap runs into himself, and in the movie, in the Dark World, and in this, we find out that, Loki could turn into Captain America to mock him. So 2012 Avengers Cap sees our Cap, and then they have a fight. And it was one of the funniest things before that was when they're in the elevator. He gets in the elevator. It's just like Winter Soldier with those Hydra agents. And in my mind, I'm like, does anybody want to get out? That's what I said out loud in the theater because I thought I was going to get that again. Instead, we get him to say "Hail Hydra," and then he walks out and he has a wink on his face. I thought that was brilliant. It was a fun little joke about the secret agent, secret Hydra stuff that they were trying to do with Cap. I like that. It was really funny. And then when he runs into himself, because you get two Captain Americas fighting each other, and then 2012 Cap when he knocks him down, oh man, and he says, "I can do this all day." The response is so damn funny because he's just like, "Yeah, I know. Obviously, I know. I gotta fight this myself, who's this jackass who doesn't give up, and I gotta keep fighting him." And it's so great. And where I thought the movie would fall hijinks, it actually is. It brings you back into it. It brings you back in the fold because Infinity War, that ending was so dire, and this first half of this movie is so I wouldn't say the first half, but a quarter of this movie in the beginning is so dire and so sad and emotional that when you get these moments of time travel and you get these characters interacting again, it's a great moment of brevity and it's a great way to get you back on board and excited for the end. And then eventually it doesn't work out, so they have to go to 1970 to get the Tesseract there. So Cap sees Peggy, doesn't get a chance to have a moment with her because that would just mess things up and make him weird. Tony eventually sees his dad from 1970. And this was one of the multiple, I think I cried about 7 times watching this movie. I think this was definitely one of those moments because as someone who's had their father pass away recently, this scene hit me right in the heart, I guess, because it was a moment that if I had the opportunity, I would do the same thing. Because he manages to have a conversation with his dad and tell him he loves him and gets to spend more time with him. And it only works because he doesn't know what he looks like because it's 1970. He hadn't been born yet. And yeah, that I teared up pretty hard at that one because it's a good character moment and it's a very relatable moment. Much like with Thor when he's talking to his mom, we've all had those moments where we've called up a parent and told him about our problems and we weren't feeling ourselves and weren't feeling like the people we need to be. And we've had our parents there to reassure us and, walk us back off the ledge and say that you're going to be okay. You just got to keep being yourself. And those two particular moments are so relatable and add so much weight and impact to those other movies and to these characters that it's just something I never could have predicted would happen in this movie. Because honestly, I don't know what I was thinking. I was thinking maybe this movie was going to be a 3-hour battle sequence from them going back to Wakanda from the end of the last movie and doing it that way. I didn't know how they were going to do this, and the fact that they went in this direction and managed to surprise me even after 11 years of these movies, they've still found ways to surprise me and keep me entertained, and it's amazing. It is truly, truly amazing. So, let's get to the meat of this bad boy. Well, no, we can't, because there's one death, again, that made me cry. When they go to Vormir, and I didn't even, that says what's going on with this movie. There's so much stuff going on. War Machine and Nebula go to get the Power Stone. They knock out Star-Lord to get the Power Stone. But this is where the movie, I think, is pretty cool. I thought this is a really smart change to what we were expecting. Since we have two Nebulas occupying the same space, and because she's a cyborg, her memories get intertwined, and kind of mesh it up. So 2014 Thanos is seeing everything that happens in the current timeline. So he knows what's going to happen. And he is a different character. 2014 Thanos is more ruthless than Infinity War Thanos, because in that you see a much more calculated, callous, smart villain. In this, he knows what's going to happen, and he's pissed because he's like, I beat them, and they couldn't handle it, So they have to use time travel. And then he's also like, you know what? If they're going after the stones and they're going to make their own gauntlet and a snap, guess what? I will wait and ruin their lives. So he's much more ruthless in this movie, and I really dig it. And I think I've seen people talk about, they feel like he's too powerful. I think people might think he's too powerful because we only saw that one time we saw him with hand-to-hand combat. That was against Hulk. Every other time he's fighting in that movie, he's using the stones. So we didn't really get to see him as a brawler without the Infinity Stone. So I think that's why he might seem a little bit overpowered, but we're getting there. I'm almost there. That's how Thanos gets brought into the mix. And then on the other side of that, we go to Vormir with Hawkeye and Black Widow. And this is where things get a little sad. And I can understand how people might feel like this character was shortchanged. And people could be worried about that. And I understand. But Black Widow, she goes with Hawkeye to Vormir. And as an audience, we all know what that means. We all know that to get the Soul Stone, you have to make a sacrifice. And because we've learned that from the last movie. And this is what, Adam joked about this, but this whole Avengers franchise has always been about teasing that Hawkeye is going to die and then not killing him. Does not change here. Like, as soon as they showed up, I thought that was going to happen. I thought Hawkeye was going to be like, look, I've done some really bad stuff. I've been going around murdering people as Ronin. I'm not a good guy. My family's gone. I have nothing to lose. Let me do this. Let me do the jump. Let me sacrifice myself. Black Widow's like, no, man, I need to sacrifice myself. This is my purpose. I brought everybody together to try and do this. Let me do it. Let me finish it. And they have this struggle. And, it was pretty emotional. And they had a little fight, a little scrum. And, Hawkeye jumps. But Black Widow catches him, puts him on a cable, sticks him to the thing, and she lets go and dies. And she doesn't get to come back because that is not how the Soul Stone works. I think because of the emotional weight of the scene, I don't think that her death wasn't impactful. And I think there is a moment where we could be, because there's a moment that would have been great with her in it, but at the end of the day, I think her death makes sense to drive the story in the right direction and the story forward. And it sucks, but that's what happens. So eventually, it doesn't matter. We get all the stones. Even though Nebula gets left behind, they torture her, they figure out where the Avengers are, so that sets up our third act. And here we are, the battle sequence. Just when Hulk puts on the glove, because Hulk is like, I'm probably the only one strong enough to do it, even though Thor's like, let me do it, I'm the strongest Avenger, and Hulk's like, no, it's radiation, most likely gamma, that's what I am, let me put on the gauntlet. By the way, it is a kick-ass gauntlet that looks like it's an Iron Man, it's Stark Tech gauntlet, which I thought was really rad. Hulk puts it on, snaps everybody back, and just when you think you have hope, which is what they've done multiple times throughout this movie, when you have hope, they tear it down right away. So all this stuff's happening. We get there. Thanos shows up. He says, 2014 Thanos is like, yo, I'm coming for you. Let's do this. Blows up the Avengers headquarters, destroys everything. They're struggling to get out. And as all the other Avengers are struggling to get out, Thanos is like, find the stones. Just sits down there. Like, whatever, you guys will do this. I'm the general. I'm the king. I'm the Mad Titan. I'm just going to sit here and let you guys do all my work for me. This is where one of the greatest scenes in the history of the MCU, where you see the three original Avengers. You got Thor, you got Cap, you got Iron Man, all standing there, looking down at Thanos. And, there's a moment where Thor's like, I just want everybody to know, once we do this, there's no going back. And Cap and Iron Man, or yeah, Iron Man both are like, yeah, we know. And then Thor's like, I was just making sure you guys knew. Then he just like Thor's up, catches Stormbreaker, catches Mjolnir. Like they're getting ready to go down there. And I thought this is such a brilliant idea because we spent almost all of Endgame with the original Avengers. It only makes sense to have them go down there and throw down with Thanos to buy time for the other Avengers to show up. Like, that is just genius. Now, granted, they didn't know at the time that these other Avengers would show up, but that's the kind of scene that we get. And it, oh man, it's it's so good. It is so good to see all three of them going back and forth fighting. And it was scary, I'll be honest. There were times I was like, this is it. This is when it happens. And that adds so much to this movie, is the ability to have that tension in my head, in knowing that they have to win. They have to win. This is it. This is the end. But at the same time, not quite sure what's going to happen. And I think that's just brilliant storytelling. And the best moment of this pre-giant battle that they have. Thor's down on the ground, calls Stormbreaker. Thanos, when he catches it, which is insane, he catches it mid-flight and then starts to push it into Thor's chest, just like Thor did in Infinity War. And then the camera cuts to little dust lifting up around Mjolnir. And I knew when this happened, I look over at Adam and I'm like, Cap is going to wield Mjolnir. It's going to happen. I can't believe it's going to happen. That's what's going on in my head. It starts to lift up, and then it flies and hits Thanos, and then it shoots back. Cap catches it, holds it up, lightning, and then pulls it down. And I'm getting goosebumps talking about it. I was sitting in my seat going, oh, like freaking out. And then the response of Thor, spot on. I knew it. Like, of course it's going to happen. You knew this was going to happen. You've seen it in the comic books, and now it's here on the screen. And not only that, he has it. Cap knows how to use the damn thing. He's swinging it around. He's smashing against his shield, making lightning. He's, like, beating the hell out of Thanos with the uppercuts with it. Like, that moment, I didn't cry at that moment. I cried a little bit later. But that moment right there is what this has all been about. I could argue and say that this is only just 3 hours of fan service. But this is so much more than that. This is fan service that is done right. How they incorporate time travel. How they incorporate Cap having that ability to have Mjolnir, how all these characters react to each other and work with each other after all these years and all these movies. It is perfection. I know people are going to have issues with this movie, but this movie is perfect. I don't know anything that I do not like about this movie. And I can find people hate it sometimes because I can nitpick movies that are great to no end. I cannot do it with this movie. It is just pure joy. So after several more minutes of him fighting, Thanos cuts apart Cap's shield, and I'm like, oh man, they really are just gonna kill him right here. And this moment where I started to bawl like a baby. Cap's down, half his shield's gone. He just tightens it up, and he gets ready. And then you hear some static, and then you hear Sam say, "Cap, can you hear me?" On your left. And then you start to see the Doctor Strange, like, circle portals open. And then we get this shot of all the other Avengers that were snapped away coming back. You get all the people from Wakanda. You get all these sorcerers. And you, like, I'm just bawling my eyes out because this is the moment. This is a splash page in a comic book. This is the moment and I said this when I saw the first Avengers, and it really drives home here. Where this is the moment where I'm crying because this was my childhood. This was I wanted all my life as a kid growing up reading comic books and watching the cartoons and loving these characters. To finally see all of that work that was put into this whole saga, this whole 22 movie stretch, 11-year stretch, all of that finally coming to fruition and it showing that it did matter. It all made sense. It all was driving to this point. I am just bawling my eyes out because we get Spider-Man back, we get Black Panther back, we get all these characters that we came to love. They're all back and they're here to beat the shit out of Thanos, and I'm just like, yes, this movie, and it blows my mind that we got to see that on screen, that it made sense, that it worked, that this movie was so damn good. it just doesn't make sense that it was this good. Man, it's so hard for me to not. I mean, seeing Spider-Man like web a dude down and then Giant Man stomp on him. Sorry, I hit my mic. Seeing Giant Man stomp on him. To see all these characters work, and then have Cap when they're trying to get the gauntlet to the quantum realm and get rid of the gauntlet so Thanos can't get it. When Cap throws Mjolnir, he says, "Hey, Queens," throws Mjolnir, Spider-Man webs it, and literally rides the hammer to the destination and all this stuff. We get to see the A-Force, and Pepper Potts is in Iron Man gear. It's just, oh, man, it was, I can't believe it, man. It really blows my mind. So this is where we get to the emotional end of an era. During the fight, Cap is like, "Doctor Strange, you said there's one chance out of 2 billion or whatever the hell. Is this the one?" He says, "If I tell you, we'll lose." And then at the end, when it looks like Thanos is going to snap again, Doctor Strange looks, doesn't say anything, just holds up one finger saying, "This is the one chance." To which goes back to Infinity War. That is so crazy. That when he gave that time stone and he says to Tony, we're in the Endgame now. He gives that time stone because he knows that Tony dies later. He's seen this all, and he's like, I got to make sure he lives. And if I have to die and give the stone to make sure he lives, I have to do it because he is the key. This is what happens. And so, Thanos does snap his fingers, finally gets the glove back on, snaps his fingers, but there's no stones. He says, "I am inevitable," is what Thanos says, and he snaps his fingers. Nothing happens. You cut to Iron Man. He's got the stones on his hand, and they morph around him. And he goes, "And I am Iron Man," which is the last line of the first movie, and it's the last line he says here, and he just snaps his fingers, saves the world, and it kills him. He dies. And there could be the most heartbreaking thing where Peter sees him and starts crying, but I think reality, the most heartbreaking sequence is when Pepper just comes up to him and says, "You can rest now." Not, "I miss you," or "I'm going to miss you," or "I love you, don't go," but, it's what you could have easily done there. She just says, "You can rest now." And that is where it really hits you. And, of course, he has the beautiful eulogy at the end. He records. He says he loves his daughter 3,000. "I love you 3,000 is what she told him. She wanted a cheeseburger, and that's what he wanted in the first movie. And they give him a Viking funeral, and you kind of get the pan to see all the different Avengers there. And going into this movie, I thought it was going to be Cap sacrificing himself, but it makes so much more sense to have Tony do it. It makes so much more sense to have Iron Man, who started this whole thing, to have him end it. And I couldn't picture a better way to send him off. And so another thing that we end with is I'm tearing up thinking about it. Captain America he's got to take all the stones back, and he does, but he comes back a little later than expected because he chose to spend time with Peggy and give her that final dance and live out a life with her. He's old. And gives the shield to Sam and passes the legacy on to him. And that's another thing. Could have been very easily to maybe kill him off or something like that. Leave the door open for maybe Chris Evans to come back. But both Cap and Iron Man had a perfect send-off. I love it when, the line when Sam says, "You want to tell me about her?" And he just says, "I don't think I will." So all of that was just to be with her. And I was a blubbering mess throughout that sequence. That was one of the many times I cried. And it was beautiful to get to see him finally get what he wanted. And all these characters to finally have the closure that they needed. And I think that is why it's a perfect close on the book. It's a perfect end. And can't say enough about it. It was wonderful. Whew, boy. And I'm very happy with it. I think, like I said, it was a perfect movie, but it is something that is sad because that's 11 years of my life have ended. It really was a moment of, it's the end of an era. It is the end of a saga. It is the end of an epic story that I don't think will ever happen again. And I do wish Marvel would take time off and really let this sink in and let us really have this moment. But these movies make a lot of money, so they got to keep the train rolling. And I think they've done a good enough job to set up the next generation. But it was truly something special, and I'm glad I got to live through those moments. And it's something, if I ever have children, whatever the future may bring for me, I cannot wait to have somebody with fresh eyes and show them all of the Marvel goodness. That's pretty much sums it up. Thank you so much for listening to this very special episode of the Jake Williams Show, the Avengers Endgame Spoilercast. I really hope you watch the movie before you listen to this, because I spoiled a lot of really cool stuff. What did you guys think about it? Let me know. I want to know what people thought about this movie. Did you think it was as perfect as I did? Did you hate it? I'm sure there's people out there that hate this movie. I'd like to hear their opinions. You can follow us on Twitter at Loud Opinionated for all the other, not only this show, but all the other shows that we do on the Loud Opinionated family network. You can like us on Facebook, Loud Opinionated, and get ready, because this next episode is going to be different. No more superhero stuff for a while. I noticed the last few episodes have been all about superheroes, but this next episode is actually something really cool, and I don't get to do it very often. I'm very excited to do it. And I got some other things. I have the rest of the month kind of planned out, and it's going to be a really fun May. I'm pretty excited about it. So, yeah. Enjoy yourselves. I'm glad we could have this therapy session. Most importantly, be loud and be proud.